Hi everyone, I'm Effany Gale. Today I'm going to be talking about what I look for in a short fiction contract and what you might like to look for as well. Quick disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer, I don't have any kind of legal expertise. This is really just based on my own personal experience signing short fiction contracts over the past 8 years or so. The first thing that I look for is what kind of rights are they buying? Are they buying print rights, electronic rights, or audio rights, or potentially all of the above? If you're signing away your first rights to one of these things, just be aware that you can't ever give away those first rights again. That's what makes them first rights. You can potentially still sell a reprint of that story further down the line, but just be very aware of what you're signing in the contract. The second thing that I look for is what is the exclusivity period and would they potentially waive that for best of the year anthologies? So the exclusivity period is the amount of time after that publisher publishes your story where you're not allowed to have it published anywhere else. So for example, if I sold a story to Clarkesworld and there was an 18-month exclusivity period, I wouldn't be able to have that story published anywhere else for the 18 months after Clarkesworld had published it. Once that 18 months was up, I could potentially sell it or publish it somewhere else as well, but that's after the exclusivity period has expired. I would say that 2 years was the longest kind of normal exclusivity period that a publisher would ask for a story. I would be wary of anyone asking for longer than that. I've seen publishers ask for no exclusivity period, which is very nice. I've seen them ask for 3 months. I've seen them ask for anywhere up to about that 2-year mark. This can be pretty important. There was at least one story that I wanted to include in my short fiction collection, Next Curious Thing, but that I didn't include because its exclusivity period had not expired yet. So it wouldn't have been legal for me to put it in and publish it in that collection unless I had delayed the collection further up until that exclusivity period wasn't in effect anymore. And it was more important for me to get that collection out when I wanted to rather than wait for that extra story. And I haven't had a story published in a best of the year anthology yet, but I do appreciate when publishers put a clause in their contracts that says that they will waive the exclusivity period if the story is chosen for a best of the year anthology, because it would be pretty heartbreaking if someone did want to include my story in one of those anthologies, but the contract didn't permit it. The next thing that I check is what are they paying me? Is it what I was expecting? And how are they paying me? This can be particularly important to me as an Australian because cashing international checks can be a very expensive process to the point where it's not even worth doing so. So I want to check that they can pay me in a way that is going to work for me, ideally PayPal. I usually get paid via PayPal and that works really well, or whether I might need to reach out to them and say, hey, can you pay me in a different way that's going to work for both of us? I also take note of when the contract says that they will be planning to pay me. So is this upon the signing of the contract? Is it upon the publication of the piece? Is it within 30 days of publication, for example? Personally, it doesn't really matter to me when they're planning to pay me as long as they are in the relatively near future, but it's still good to keep a note of because it means that if they are late with paying you, if you know when you're supposed to be paid, you can follow up with them and say, hey, you were supposed to be paying me a few weeks ago, I haven't received anything, what's going on? Something else that I look for, is there a rights reversion clause? So for example, if a publisher hasn't published my story within 18 months of signing the contract, then the contract becomes null and void, all of the rights return to me and I can potentially sell that story somewhere else. I don't want to end up in a kind of limbo situation where I've sold the rights, but that publisher isn't publishing it after all for whatever reason, but I then can't sell the story anywhere else either because that publisher still has those rights. I also check to see if the contract says anything about the level of edits that the publication can do without consulting you. So for example, it's pretty normal for a contract to specify something like, we can make minor spelling and grammar changes without running them past you, but for anything more substantive than that, I would want to review them first. Similarly, does the contract specify a particular amount of time that they expect you to respond to edits within? So the contract might say something like, we expect you to review and get back to us about any edits within 14 days of us sending them to you. So that's really good for you to know in advance. And also, if you know that you are going to be unavailable or uncontactable for a certain amount of time at a certain point, you can let them know in advance and make sure that that isn't going to be an issue for them or for you. I check if they're expecting to send me a free copy of the publication as part of the contract. This certainly isn't a requirement, but it can be very nice to have, especially if I can expect to receive a copy of that magazine or anthology in the mail. And lastly, of course, is there anything specified in the contract that's special or particular to this particular publication? I always make sure to read all of my contracts carefully. A couple of bonus points at the end here. I haven't personally encountered either of these, but it's good to keep your eyes out for them as a warning. Be very wary of anyone who tries to buy your copyright. You shouldn't ever be selling your copyright unless you've written in an established universe, like you've written a Star Wars tie-in. Selling your copyright is essentially selling your ownership of the story. It's not yours anymore. So be very careful of selling your copyright, and if you do, make sure that you're being fairly compensated. Also, be wary of contracts that buy the rights to your story in all languages, rather than just the language that the story is currently written in. This could prevent you from selling translations of the story in the future. So those are all of the things that I look for when reading my short fiction contracts. If there are other things that you look for that I didn't mention here, by all means, please let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe to see more of these kind of videos in the future, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.